Welcome to Ageless Athlete, the podcast where we go deep into lives of those who keep moving, keep striving, and keep pushing the boundaries. Forget age, forget limitations. Here it's all about the fire in the heart. And today we have a guest whose story is guaranteed to light that fire in you. Craig DeMartino embodies the spirit of this podcast in every way. He's a climber, a teacher, a mentor, and an inspiration to anyone who's ever faced a challenge. Craig's relationship with the outdoors goes way back. Starting in the humble crags of Pennsylvania, it wasn't just a hobby. It became a way of life, a passion that shaped his world. But life, as we know, throws curveballs. In his case, it was a devastating accident that changed everything. He found himself at a crossroads, facing a future that seemed unimaginable. But Craig is not a man who backs down. He made a choice, a bold one, to not let this event define him. And that choice led him on an incredible journey of adaptation, grit, and ultimately triumph. Today, Craig stands as a champion adaptive athlete. He has 5 ascents of El Cap, 2 of them in less than 24 hours. He is the 2 times national champion, 2 times bronze medalist in Worlds, and 5 times Extreme Games gold medalist. What makes Craig's story truly stand out? Craig now dedicates his life to helping others discover the transformative power of climbing. He works tirelessly with veterans and individuals with disabilities, sharing his knowledge, experience, and unwavering belief in the human spirit's ability to overcome any challenge. He leads adaptive climbing clinics, mentors aspiring climbers, and advocates for greater inclusivity in the sport he loves. He not only returned to the sport he loves, but also dedicated himself to helping others discover the power and joy of climbing, no matter their physical abilities. We will be exploring his story in detail. The highs, the lows, the moments of doubt, and the unwavering resolve that carried him through. We will talk about the incredible power of the community, the innovations that have opened doors for adaptive athletes, and the profound lessons that Craig has learned along the way. Craig is extremely thoughtful, very articulate, and such a gifted storyteller. You will be so glad you tune into this one. Hi, Craig. Thanks for joining us today on the Ageless Athlete podcast. Please tell us, where are you today and what did you have for breakfast?
I am in Loveland, Colorado, where my wife and I are based out of. We've lived in Colorado for a really long time, so that's kind of our home. I actually had oatmeal this morning.
How do you prepare your oatmeal?
So today I was super lazy and I just put nuts in it with a little bit of honey. That's it. Super simple.
Simple, efficient, and reliable.
And mobile. Mobile when I need it to be mobile.
Sure. Actually, funny you speak of mobile. I half expected you to perhaps be in your camper van. I thought maybe you were taking advantage of spring weather to get the climbing season rolling.
Yeah, we just came back from Spain, so we were climbing in Chulia. So I was, when we got back here, the weather is actually, yeah, as you know, is really good right now. So we are kind of itchy to go here, but we have a bunch of work we're catching up on right now. So we're doing some clinics and things like that. So climbing, I think next week though, get outside again. So we're happy. I'm happy spring is here.
I feel we already have this one thing in common, which is I see sun peeking behind you. The day looks bright, and it's the same here in San Francisco. It's a gloriously sunny, beautiful day.
Yep. It's been we've been really fortunate. My wife and I travel a fair amount, and every time we've gone in the past 2 months climbing on these climbing trips, when we leave Colorado, it snows. And then when we come back, it's like 70 degrees. So I think we're timing it right. And I think like now, I think for the foreseeable future here in Colorado, it's supposed to be really nice. So I am not arguing. I love it. So yeah, when I need the sun. I'm not one of those people who can do like the clouds all the time. I could never live in like Seattle because it's beautiful, but I need to see the sun a lot. So this Colorado kind of serves that in spades. So I love it.
I will say that I am more of a lizard when it comes to soaking in soaking in
Yes,
sunshine than maybe a
it's a
polar
good way
bear
to
or
say
something.
that. That's a good way to say that. I like that. Awesome.
Great. Can you share a bit about who you are? What do you do?
Yeah, of course. I have been a climber pretty much most of my life. I started climbing right out of like about halfway through my college career. A friend of mine was getting married, and he did a bachelor party where we went climbing. And I had never climbed before. I just was curious and went, and I loved it from the very first day. And this was in Pennsylvania, like this scrappy little cliff in Pennsylvania called Livesey Rock, and we went out. And to me, that was like as big as El Cap. Like I think it's maybe 35 feet tall. But I mean, not being a climber, I was like amazed by what we were doing. But I really loved the engagement and the movement. And I wasn't a very athletic kid. I was an art student. I wasn't an outdoor person. I grew up climbing or camping and fishing with my dad and my brother. But I wouldn't have said like I was an outdoor person. I just did those things as a hobby. And then we went climbing, and I was like, that it just kind of clicked something in my brain just clicked. And I just remember thinking, this is what I want to do now. So I started climbing with this buddy who was at that bachelor party. And then he kind of passed me on to this other individual. Because, back then I've been climbing about 34 years. Back then there wasn't a climbing gym yet. So you kind of depended on other people to show you around. And that's what these friends did. They kind of taught me the basics of how to place gear and all that good stuff, and do it efficiently and do it well. So you're not pulling gear and hitting the ground. That's obviously what we don't want. So it was really neat to kind of grow up in that time as a climber and as a human. I was just as I was maturing, I was also maturing with my climbing, and then moved to Colorado. Met my wife in Pennsylvania. She's actually from Pennsylvania as well, but we met in a climbing gym that I was working in. And then she was going to CSU. I moved out here to climb more. And then we kind of started climbing together and got married and ended up having 2 kids who are now young adults, which has been really fun as well. And then Cindy is a core climber as myself. She's been climbing as long as I have been. And we work together. We teach adaptive climbing clinics all over the country, and in Puerto Rico and Hawaii, and where we go and kind of show people with all different physical disabilities how to climb and engage with the natural world, and kind of show them that by doing that, you're the healing and just the peace of mind and quality of life you get from that. We use climbing as that vehicle to get them there. So we're able to introduce all these individuals to climbing and just how beautiful it can be. And as you and I were chatting before, it is a lifestyle sport, and kind of showing them that lifestyle and saying this, maybe it's not climbing, but maybe it is nature. So we want you to engage with both and then figure out what you like. And then they can go, do whatever they're going to do. But the nonprofit that we work with that is based in Denver, that's called Adaptive Adventures, and they offer different outdoor sports. So, lots of the kind of the sports that we all know, so, with the exception of surfing, it's skiing, biking, climbing, paddling, things like that. We can kind of then push them that way too. So they can still get that quality of life, but we're just kind of that entry point for them to show them, hey, you can be doing these things. So that's kind of me in a nutshell up to today.
I forgot to ask you, how old are you?
I'm 58. Getting old as dirt.
You may say 58, and I will believe you because this is being recorded, but you do not look a day over 45. I was thinking we are the same age.
Oh, you're wonderful. You're my new favorite person.
We are recording this for those of us who are listening on audio, but yeah, Craig has this great head of hair, which I'm very jealous of. So, awesome. So you started climbing 34 years ago in Pennsylvania. So you were let's say you were 34 at that, sorry, you were 24
Correct.
approximately,
Approximately, yeah.
which is actually also about the same time I started climbing. I started climbing in the
Oh,
East
wow.
Coast, in North Carolina, and at the New River Gorge in West Virginia. So, yeah, maybe 24 is a good year to start climbing for those of us who still want to.
That must be. It's weird too, because like we don't meet. I mean, oddly enough, we do know a lot of older athletes who are still doing their sport, but like there's not a lot. There's not like a ton of people who just have said, "I'm going to do this my whole life." I kind of, because we're in the climbing world and see them come in and out. People will cycle in and then cycle out as things happen in their life. We've been really fortunate just to be able to stay as a part of it and make it kind of that lifestyle that we like to pursue and chase. And it's still fun. I mean, as I'm sure it's still, I love doing it still. It's, even when it's bad, it's still good. So it's a really fun thing to be a part of. Sure.
And then you were savvy enough to meet your life partner at the climbing gym, which makes for I would say unified approach
Very
to
much.
spending one's time.
Very much so.
What did you study in school or
Oh,
college, and what did you think you would be doing as an adult, or what did you want to be doing as an adult before climbing came over and took
ah,
over your senses?
well, so I studied design and photography, graphic design and photography, and was working as a photographer. I worked for Associated Press for about 8 years in Philly, and then I worked for I did news for a long time, thinking I wanted to stay there. But then that's a bit of a grind, and I wasn't really climbing as much when I was doing that. And then I realized, you know what, I don't want to be getting shot at and see all the things I was seeing. So I left when I came out here. Actually, the Associated Press, at the person I worked for in Philly, said I can connect you to the ones in Denver, but I passed, and I was like, I think I'm going to just move on now and do something else. And so I thought I wanted to do climbing photography, and I came out here and I met Craig Lubin, who was a force of nature here in the Front Range. And Craig and I became fast friends. Cindy already knew him, so that's how I got introduced to him. But he and I were ended up becoming good friends, and he was into photography as well. So he and I would kind of work together, and he was writing for Climbing Magazine at the time. So I figured, okay, I'm just going to do that. But then I quickly realized, when you're a climbing photographer, and this is why I have a ton of respect for any climbing photographer I work with, you work your ass off and it is hard work. And so I realized I wanted to be climbing and not taking pictures. And so Craig and I shot Craig a bunch, and Craig would shoot me, and he would write things, we would do things together. But I quickly realized, okay, this is not what I want to be doing. And so I took my design degree and my photo degree, and I started working kind of more in publishing, where I could kind of do stuff for magazines, not in the climbing world, but like product photography. I did that for a long time. And then just lifestyle photography. And so I was doing those in conjunction with my climbing. And then climbing just kept getting bigger and bigger in my life. And photography kind of was holding its own, because that's how I supported myself. But I didn't know what I wanted to do after that. I just was kind of, doors were opening and closing as I was moving through life. And then, of course, I had, a big change in my life in 2002 that kind of definitely pivoted me and redirected me. But, the design piece, I still feel like I use my design background just because I understand what people are saying when they're talking about it, and marketing and things like that. So I think that's only helped me. But now I haven't, this is embarrassing, but I haven't picked up a camera other than my iPhone in, oh my gosh, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you when I did it last. That's terrible. But it's been a long time. Yeah.
You are certainly not the first person to put your larger camera to rest in favor of a smartphone camera. Many of us
Exactly.
are guilty of doing that. And you are so right. Mad props to the luminaries amongst us who are able to
Oh
juggle
my
both
gosh.
taking photos and climbing at the same time
Yes.
and do them
Yes.
both with such panache. It is
Yeah.
a testament of, I don't know,
It
grit,
is.
hard work, and
It
talent, I
is.
think.
I watch them work and I'm just, I'm in awe. Like, I mean, I've climbed El Cap with photographers like Mikey Schaefer and James Q. Martin, and you watch those guys on a rope, and it's just the amount of efficiency and professionalism is, and fitness, just like general fitness. Those guys are monsters. And yet people see the photo and they're like, oh, that's cool. But it's like, oh my God, do you know what went into that? That is like some serious work right there. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Mad props to all the things they.
Quick, you just alluded to this life changing event that transpired in 2002 that perhaps began your journey as an adaptive climbing athlete. If you're comfortable sharing, could you tell us a little bit about what happened and how it impacted your approach to climbing and to your life?
Yeah, of course. It was 2002, and I had been climbing, 14 or so years at that. I'm not sure actually how much, but was here in Colorado and went to Rocky Mountain National Park with a really good friend of ours, who I'm still really good friends with as well. And he's older. He's slightly older than me, probably 3 years older than me. Had been climbing longer than me at that point. And he just said, "Hey, let's go do this thing way out on Sundance Buttress," which on Lumpy Ridge, it's in Estes Park basically, but it's this beautiful line of cliffs that run out the valley. And Sundance Buttress is the last escarpment. And we kind of hiked out. It's a pretty far hike. It's like 45 minutes or an hour, on this flat trail, then heading up this talus cone. And we went out and we're going to do this thing that he had, I think he had top roped it the year before. It's called White Man. And it's an 11C kind of discontinuous crack system that runs up to a ledge. And it's 4 pitches, but the money pitch is the first pitch. And so most people just do that 11C first pitch. And so we kind of went out and he said, I don't want to lead it. He's like, but I do want to work on it and then lead it. So he's like, I said, yeah, I'd gladly lead it. We had been climbing a bunch of different things in the park. Because at that time, my kids were young. My kids were 2 and 4. So Cindy had run this 50K trail race the day before in Leadville. So she was taking a rest day, and so we would kind of like switch back and forth, And so Steve and I went up there, we hiked in, racked up, and it totally normal day. It was just one of those weird, you feel like a bit nervous, but you can't tell if it's like nerves or you're just excited to be getting on something new. And I think it was a mix of both. I just had this weird little slightly off tied in, and I, the first 10 or so feet, then I kind of got in that rhythm of, good crack climb. You're enjoying yourself. The gear is kind of tricky on it because it's like these weird flappy pieces of granite that you have to like feed the cams behind. So you can't, a little bit of blind placements, but it just makes it more challenging and fun. And so led the climb, got to the anchor, and the anchor is 100 feet off the deck. It's a small little ledge that you can your front of your feet are on the ledge, but it's narrow that you're kind of hanging. So it's about 6 inches wide by, I don't know, 3 feet long. And there's 2 bolts up there. It's a drilled anchor. And so I got up there, clipped in. And what he and I had talked about was he said, I want to top rope it to just get the moves and feel it again. And then I think the idea was we would drop the rope and then he would lead it. So I thought, we never communicated this piece. This is where it kind of got off the rails. When I heard top rope, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be lowered and I'll belay him from the ground. And he was thinking he was going to second the pitch and come up, and then we'd wrap off together. And then the rope would already, would be set up for a top rope. So I rigged it for a lower. So basically took 2 long slings, equalized them, and then ran my rope through there. I was still clipped in directly to the anchor. And the anchor sits about 4 feet from the actual climb. So you get up on this ledge and then you have to traverse slightly over. So there's a bit of a bend, the rope's kind of traveling to your right and then down that 100 feet. So I yelled down to Steve and I said, okay, and at that point we were using kind of slang just because we weren't, number one, I couldn't see him. And so I just yelled down, okay, I'm all I'm ready, I'm good. And he said, okay, you're all good. He thought, okay, Craig's going to now belay me up and I'll get to the anchor and we'll come down together. I heard, okay, you're all good. So I reached over one last time and I kind of pulled on the rope to see if I felt him, felt the friction back. And I did. I felt like, I felt some kind of pull going back. What that really was 100 feet of rope hanging down through, 10 pieces of gear that I had clipped. So I felt tension and I thought that's him. So because I couldn't see him, I just pulled in, unclipped, sat back, and I just started falling. And so it's weird. Like I've played this in my head a lot of times, because it was such a big accident. And when I started to fall, I thought, oh, he must have like a loop of slack out. Maybe he was like putting his shoes on. I didn't know what was going on, like moving a bag or who knows, right? Your brain starts thinking really quickly, like you're kind of you're assessing what's happening. And so I thought, okay, it's going to snap tight here any second. But then I started kind of picking up speed and I thought, oh, maybe he like fell and is getting pulled. Because that actually happened to me at Shelf Road one year. A buddy of mine was barefoot and he was belaying, and when I popped off and he got drug a little bit because his feet dug in to the rocks and it kind of hurt his feet. So he kind of got pulled by me. So I thought, oh, maybe that's happening. And it's still in your brain, you're thinking I am going to stop. And then I realized I'm just picking up speed and I'm going faster and faster. I'm not stopping. So the climb is steep, but it's really kind of, there's a lot of things that you could bump into on the way down. So I wanted to kind of get away from the wall. And the last thing that I remember is seeing the trees to my left, because the climb sits on a slanted hill. So I could see this kind of green blur coming, and I just pushed to get away from the cliff. So I both hands, and that took me out, and I actually turned and could see. But what it did was it also tipped me, because just the momentum I created after that. So I was, going down and then tipping sideways. And I was falling most of that 100 feet sideways. But about 20 feet from the ground, right where the climb starts, there was a dead pine tree that was leaning against the cliff, and I clipped it with my head. And so that the tree stood me back up to standing, basically perfect standing position, which from that height is probably the only way you can actually survive, because if you land sideways, you just, your head's going to get smashed. You're going to crush all your internal organs. I landed standing, like leaning slightly to the right. And I know that because my right side got broken more than my left side. And when I hit so hard that the climbing shoes I had on exploded, and all the bone, like I had compound fractures of both legs. So on the lower part of my legs, where your ankles kind of come into your tibia and your fibular, that all just exploded, and my heels exploded, shoes exploded, severed the artery in my right leg. So that shockwave though has to go somewhere. It doesn't just like dissipate. So it goes up your body, and it went up and broke my back. It crushed my back at L2, which is kind of through your belly button here. And that I hit so hard, I powdered it. It just kind of disappeared. It just keeps moving, and it broke the ribs on my right side, hit my elbow and broke the bursa sacs on my elbow, tore up my shoulder. And then as it exited, it broke my neck at C5, C6, which is right here through your Adam's apple. And then I just hit and I just crumpled over. And Steve was standing, 10 feet away. And he was just obviously shocked and ran over. And he said, because I severed the artery in my leg, I was bleeding really badly. And he has some first aid training, luckily. And so he grabbed a sling off the rack and put a tourniquet on my leg really quick with a stick, just kind of twisted it, which probably in many ways, I think saved my life, because I would have just bled out. And we were pretty far back in the back. It's a pretty long way back there. And Steve, this is 2002. Steve had a cell phone with him, but like back then, like we didn't really use cell phones that much. You had it, but you didn't really use it that much. And next to Sundance is about 1,000 feet. It's a big piece of rock, and in the park, in the middle of nowhere. And he flips it open and got a cell phone signal, and ended up getting connected to 911. And then 911 connected him to Rocky Mountain Rescue. And the guy who picked up, this is when it just like gets super trippy. The guy who picked up the phone at Rocky Mountain Rescue was a climber. And he was like, "What climb are you at?" And he told him, and he's like, "I know right where you are. Do not move." And so this guy, Eric Gabriel, was literally at my side. I hit the ground at around 2:30. This guy was at my side 45 minutes later, which is unheard of in the backcountry. It's just crazy to me. And so he got there and started doing the initial assessment, realized, oh my God, this guy is wrecked. And he's like, I knew it. We had to get you out of there really fast. And so they put together a rescue. It took about 7 hours, but they got a helicopter to come in. They flighted me to Fort Collins. I was in intensive care for a week because they didn't think I would survive the night just because of all the injuries. And they told my wife, they fused my back right away from L1 through 4, took all the debridement out. They go in and kind of clean out your spine. But then they said, we're just going to wait because he's got so many injuries. We're just going to see if he survives. I did, obviously. And then basically for the next 3 months, I would just have surgery after surgery after surgery, just kind of fix what I had, broken. And then at 3 months, they kind of send you home. They get you as good as they're going to get you. I went home using a walker, both legs in a cast, back still in a neck was in a C-collar. And you then start to try to piece your life back together because for me, there wasn't I'm going to call this person and talk to them. I didn't know anyone who got hurt that bad. So the next year pretty much was me just trying to sort out, okay, who am I? What just happened? You're trying to piece that together as well. And then my wife and I were trying to figure out, I said to her, or actually she said to me, we obviously talked about climbing when I was in the hospital. And she said, if you want to climb again, I totally understand that and we'll help you do that. If you don't want to climb again, I also understand that. And that's fine. You can decide to do that. It's up to you. But I feel because she was able to kind of introduce that thought back to me, it made me go, oh, I do miss climbing. I missed, I would talk to our friends when they would visit and, I missed being out there. So there was that curiosity still. I just didn't know how I would do it. I had no freaking clue. And then right around 18 months after the accident, my right leg was still in a cast. I had done 11 surgeries on it. And my orthopedic was that's it. We can't, you broke it so bad. There's nothing in there really. So you're either going to live your life like this in a cast the rest of your life. I was 34 at the time, or you could do something different. And they don't really ever offer you amputation. That's not what they're there for. You need to get there on your own. And I talked to a couple different people who had been amputated and were living full lives and athletes. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to do that. And went in and talked to him, my orthopedic, and he said, you're doing the right thing. And so December 3rd, the year after the accident, I went in and amputated. And then that kind of started this whole new direction for me because I kind of went back to climbing about 4 months later, top roping with Cindy and the kids. And that kind of made me realize, oh, I still love doing this. I just have to figure out how do I do it now? Because I'm completely different. So what does that look like? What is my new normal? And how do I integrate that into the climbing world that I love? And that started me kind of in the direction that I've been in now for the past, 20, where I'm just learning to interface with this new body and prosthetic and things like that. Challenges, how do I make that into still being able to climb, still being able to enjoy climbing, and now be able to show other people what climbing is like. So it definitely was a pivot, a big change for me. But now in retrospect, it's I wouldn't want to fall off a cliff again. No way. But I do appreciate what it has done for me in my life now and the direction that it has pushed me. So to get me here.
Greg, I appreciate you taking us through that story, even though I'm sure you've had to recount some of these details many, many times over the last couple of decades. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about this experience. You packed it all into this nice little essay for us, but there are so many things that happened some of the details are for sure. I mean, the whole story is mind-boggling, and some of the details are worth getting into just a little bit. The one thing that I want to call out is, so this is 2002. This is before cell phones became the new normal. And
Yes, very much.
the fact the fact that you were out in the backcountry and you were able to receive a phone signal
Yes.
and connect to somebody who understood your location. So again, I think for people don't realize this, but back then you couldn't just share your location on your phone. Like you couldn't just
No.
triangulate somebody by just sharing that thing and have somebody just come and get you.
Right.
It didn't work like
Right.
that.
Exactly.
I had so a little maybe a decade after your accident, I had a little accident myself. Nothing like what you went through, but I was climbing with a friend at Lover's Leap in California, which you might know
Yep.
about. It's this crag
Yep.
by Tahoe. And it's funny, we also had a little climbing accident and we had to call rescue services. But it's funny, we did not, you cannot get, maybe now it's changed, but back then you could not get signal at the bottom of the cliff.
Sure.
But two-thirds are way up this, I forget how tall Lover's Leap is, but anyway, two-thirds up this, let's say this 500-foot face, my phone was working. So if we could connect to somebody and have somebody guide us to do a bit of, yeah, to stabilize us and then help us come down. But it is, I guess some of us are lucky. I mean, we can also be extremely unlucky. Like what happened to you, would not
Right.
want to wish that upon anybody. But in some ways, do you ever like on the flip count your blessings in a way where you're like, oh my god, I went through this totally freak accident. People, millions, I don't know, not millions, but probably thousands of top ropes are set up world over, maybe every day, and
Sure.
you ended up on this wrong side, this really really freak situation. But do you ever think about the fact
Right.
that it could have just had your partner not had that bit of first aid knowledge and awareness and all these other things with the cell phone signal and the rescue not come together, things could have gone more south than they already had.
Absolutely. I mean, I am constantly in awe of all the things that lined up because, like you said, like you couldn't just drop a pin and say I'm here. It's like this. The guy knew, like, not only did he know where we were, he actually knew how to access it through this ranch. It's called the McGregor Ranch, which is basically the whole valley in Estes is owned by this family. They had permission to go through a gate, so he's like, not only did he know, like, okay, you're at the base of White Man on Sundance, I know where that is. I know how to drive my truck to the base of the talus is what he did. And then he could run up the hill. So he only had to do like a 10-minute approach with the pack on. Whereas we had to hike in, like I said, like 45 minutes to an hour to get to the area we were in. This guy, Eric, knew exactly how to get there. So everything from like the helicopter being able to land before dark, because they have to fly by line of sight in that valley. And I remember them saying that to me, like, if we don't get you out by dark, we have to drive you. And if we drive you, this is not what they say to you, but like now later you learn all these things. If they have to drive, that obviously takes a lot more time. With a person who has all this heavy trauma and is bleeding, probably not going to survive. So a helicopter is just like the thing you need to get on. And so they were able to get me in a helicopter before dark so that to get me to the level of care that I needed. Just all of those things lined up. And I'm just constantly in awe of that. And I'm so grateful for anyone who was involved with that, who, came and helped me. And I, to this day, I bump into people who were part of that. And we'll kind of reminisce a little bit. And it is so humbling to me to just go, holy crap, thank you just for being there and doing what you think is your job, but like you are literally saving people's lives. And that is so humbling to have been on the other side of that. And then all these years look back and go, God, that was insane. And it still baffles me how crazy it is. Even though it's me and I lived it, it still baffles me when I see when I see Sundance, when I drive by, because we're in that area all the time, not all the time, but quite often. And, you look at it and you're like, because like you said, it could have turned so many other ways and didn't. And, I'm just so grateful to still be here doing what I'm doing and being part of the community that I am. So yeah, it's not lost on me. I'm amazed by it all.
When I had my little mini epic, I also was carried out in a litter over the talus, whatever, at Levels, only because they wanted to be sure that I wasn't hurt any more badly than it seemed apparent. Like I had, something going on. But honestly, like me, so I grew up overseas, grew up in India and came here as an immigrant. I think for the first time, it really struck me how grateful I am to this country and to volunteers who do this as a public service. So I was bowled over by emotion. I'm like, oh my God, like to have this help in times of need. Yeah, really. Yeah. I mean, God, America has its problems, but God bless America for.
I agree. I totally agree, man. Like everything you just said, I'm like 100%. Yes, that is very true. All of it.
One other point that I think is worth explaining to many people here who may not climb as much is a lot of these places in the backcountry, they're not often connected by roads, by trails, by signs for people to be able to find other people. You are breaking trail often to get to the base of a climb. You are going places where very few people go. So again, the fact that this person knew how to cross through all kinds of things to organize this rescue is incredible. Moving on a little bit, Craig, you made this insane decision to voluntarily subject yourself to amputation. I want to understand like the choices that you were facing. One is you would have continued on, and I think besides the leg, your body was also impacted in other ways.
Sure.
Had you carried on without the amputation and maybe you were able to get some data from other people versus the decision to actually go through the amputation, also after having spoken to people, you made some trade-offs. Hindsight, knock on wood, like those have worked out well. But had you not gone through that, what kind of life would you be facing, and what kind of limitations would you have had today?
And so my right leg, my left leg, they took the hardware out of. So they put it in to kind of get it to heal, and then they remove it. My right leg, all the hardware was left in just because there wasn't enough bone density or even bones that connected, that it couldn't hold its own shape. So they kind of shaped it with metal. So I would have had to, had I not amputated, the walking boot that they made for me was like a custom hard shell case that went over my whole foot and ankle and kind of came about halfway up my leg to give it stability and give it some kind of platform to be able to stand on and move. My orthopedic told me, without that on, I could walk like on a carpeted floor that was perfectly flat. I could walk barefoot on that, right? But like I couldn't go very far. I could maybe walk across the house and then it would just hurt too much. That would have just progressed and gotten worse because the amount of joint damage that I did on both throughout my body would have just kept getting worse. And so my doctor explained it to me one time as having mashed potatoes on the end of a stick is what he said my foot looked like. So it was just like this weird, it would have been fine, but it also would not have been the life that I live now. It would have been a much more sedentary life, which that just wasn't something I wanted to do. I mean, I knew I could continue on the path I was on, but I also keep in mind my back was fused, my neck is fused. When I would walk, I was uneven because of the boot. And so it would have been, I have to deal with chronic pain anyway, even with the amputation, because you just cannot do all this damage and not have residual effects for your life. But I realized, I wouldn't have been able to climb. I probably couldn't hike into something because of the foot. And I just kept looking at it, and it was so misshapen. I couldn't move it. It was just like this appendage that just didn't work. And so Cindy and I would talk, just all the time about what it seems insane to cut your leg off, but like you get to a point where you're like, if I don't cut this off, if I don't amputate this, I am not going to move forward. I am going to stay right here. And the thing that I kept going back to was the accident. When you're in that kind of trauma, it just keeps taking from you. You just keep losing stuff. You can't feel certain things. I have all this paralysis from the broken back where, I can't feel, like basically the half of my body is numb. So from my middle section here back, I can't feel. So if you touch my back, I can't really feel you touch it. I can't feel temperature on my leg. I can't feel my other foot that I have, my real foot. I can't feel my foot because of the spinal cord injuries. So you start to realize, like, okay, if I'm going to have those things no matter what, at least I would have like a good foot to stand on, and that would be the amputated one. So your mind kind of, when you first start thinking about it, you're like, hell no, there's no way that's insane. And then as you go down that road, you start to realize, like, if I want to do anything past like being sedentary, sitting on the couch, I would still work. I would still be a dad, still be a husband, but I wouldn't be the person that I wanted to be. You realize, okay, if that's the only way to do that, then I'm just going to do that. And so it took me, 18 months to get there. And right around 17 months, I developed this nerve disorder in my right leg. It's called RSD, or some people chronic pain syndrome or something. It's basically this really wicked nerve pain. And I went in, and the neurologist said, oh, it's because when you hit the ground, they reconstruct that nerve, and the nerve remembers what happened last, which was you hitting the ground. So you're going to feel that pain over and over and over and over. And so I said, well, if I amputate, do I get above it? Like, is that a way to do that? And he's like, you're probably not going to get above it, but he said you might be able to control it some with some drugs and things like that. Your foot's still going to hurt all the time. It's not going to get better. So that also kind of dug into why I wanted to do it. And then once I made the decision, it was kind of empowering, because it was kind of like me finally saying, okay, enough of this. I need to do this really big traumatic thing, but in the end, it's going to move me forward. So let's just do that. And then, December 3rd, jumped in, fight it. And for me, I realized I had the perspective of, okay, I'm still here. I love my wife, I love my family, and I love to climb. So I'm going to just focus on those three things, and that's it. I'm not going to worry about the other crap, the trauma. If you're occupying this vessel, and by that I mean this body that is shattered, you're in it 24/7. You don't get a break. So I realized when I was actually climbing, I felt better. I felt like I was moving. I was like my joints were getting, lubricated, and I could feel better. But when I was sedentary, I felt like garbage. And that's the same way for me to this day. If I'm sedentary for a long period of time, I just get really creaky and achy and things like that. So when I started to move again, I was like, oh, okay, this feels good. This is a good thing. And then once I got over the mental part of like, oh my God, I don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to fall again. And that took a year or two to get over that. I top roped for like probably a year and a half straight, to just feel like, okay, my head's not going to explode while I'm doing this. Like I can deal with this again. Kind of figure out how to compartmentalize that fear piece, and then moving forward. I just realized that's what makes me happy. And so why would I ignore that? I felt like I didn't want the accident to take that as well. Cause it was an accident. It wasn't like climbing just crushed me. It was an accident. It could happen to anyone. That's why they literally call it an accident. So once I understood that and processed that through, and talked with my partner who I was with that day, Steve, and he and I processed that, our friendship and just our relationship and how this all affected things. I realized that's what I wanted to still be doing. And And then what was weird was I met the right people at the right time who helped me kind of pursue things. That's when I met Hans Florian, who's been on your pod. And again, I can't say enough to the community of climbers where I would reach out to these people and say, hey, I'm thinking of trying to do this thing. And they would say, oh, hell yeah, let's do this. Like Hans was like, oh yeah, I'll help you climb fast. What do you want to know? I was going to go to a speed climbing comp, and he was like, oh yeah, come out to the Bay Area and we'll go climb El Cap together, and we'll do it in a day because no amputees have done that. And I thought he was batshit crazy when he said that. I was just like, dude, I was in a wheelchair when he said that. Actually, I was doing wheelies in a wheelchair when he said that to me. He didn't know that, but I was on my phone. But I'm like, what? That isn't the dumbest idea I've ever heard of, dude. Like, no, dude, you don't do that. Didn't tell him any of that. I was just like, I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna see what happens. So my wife and I came out with the kids and we went to the valley, and it ended up working great. We did Lurking Fear together. But it's like, I was really fortunate to say, this is what I love to do. So now how do I do it in this new normal that is this shattered body that only works kind of decent a short amount of time during the day? Like, how do I balance that? But even though it was hard and like trying to figure stuff out, it was still, every time I did it, I was like, God, I still want to do this. I still had that passion and that itch to do it. And I just couldn't see myself not doing it. And that's what I tell people. It's like, if you feel like you're being driven somewhere, like, embrace it. Like, don't run from it. Just like, if it's showing you over and over, this is going to make you happy, do that. Like, just go ahead and pursue that. That's a good thing. If it's a healthy pursuit, man, just like go all in, just see what happens. Right. Because I had no idea where it was going to go. I was just like, I'll just do this part and see what happens. Right. And just the doors kind of kept opening for me then. And it was just this weird journey that has now become what I would consider, I think, one of the most wonderful lives I could ever live. It's just like it put me in a really great spot. So I am ever thankful for it all.
Human beings are designed to move. Locomotion is such a part of our identity. I mean, we could not have fed ourselves if we didn't know how to move and find and forage. Right. Those of us who have been lucky to discover the benefits, the life-giving properties of being able to use our bodies, I think there is that mind and body connection, because I think you are such a good person to talk about this, because I think climbing and moving perhaps brought you into this flow state, gave you the ability to find delight and validation in using your physical powers, which perhaps allowed you to maybe transcend some of your physical anguish and mental anguish, because you're grappling with your new identity. You're able to get back into climbing, and you're able to use yourself in a way that give you joy.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask is, and this might be a bit dumb, but all amputations are not the same. You had your leg amputated. Somebody else might go through the same thing, but then the rest of their body may still be quite intact. While in your case, you described, some of the other things with the paralysis and other injuries to your other foot, and how you have to keep up your medication regimen. Craig, just jumping up ahead a little bit, you have gone on and competed and done really well in Paralympic Games and other competitions for adaptive athletes.
Yeah.
Is there a distinction made between the kind of adaptations people are confronted with when they come to take part in, let's say, a climbing competition?
Yeah, they break it. It's kind of cool. Like, they break it into divisions of what that physical disability is. So like amputations, for instance, like you said, they're all different, but you can kind of paint with a broad brush and say, okay, leg amputations are classified as below the knee or above the knee. I'm below the knee. And that is a break. And then you also have neurological effects. So you can have an amputation with a neurological effect. but they generally are separated. So you'll just have amputations in one bucket, and then neurological in another bucket, blind in another bucket, so on and so forth. And then arms are the same way. So an arm is going to either be below the elbow or above the elbow, is kind of where that classification will hit. And there are nuances to each different. That is like with a broad brush, they do break them into these different categories. So then you're competing against someone who's kind of like you. Obviously, not going to be exactly like you. Everyone is different, but you do have similarities in that physical disability. So they want to make it as equitable as they can. It's very hard to do that, but I think they do the best they can. And I competed for I think I competed for like 12 or 13 years and loved it because of the community that I met. Like I was never a comp climber before I got hurt. And then all of a sudden I went to this first comp and I was like, oh my God, like everyone I met was just like, holy crap, there's this whole world that I had no idea. Like all of a sudden you're around everyone who had some kind of disability. And that just, even to this day, that doesn't happen very often, where I'm just around a lot of people like who look like me. And so it's like this weird comfort. You're just like, oh, this is kind of rad. Like everybody taking their leg off when they're sitting and they're resting and comparing parts and pieces. And it's like, damn, this is cool. And some of my best friends are from that part of my life. You know, I'm still very much in touch with them. We still climb together. We still see each other. And so you get this like community, you just didn't even know it was there. It's like, damn, it's powerful to me. It was like, this is really cool stuff. And I think that's why I competed so long, was I just still, you know, you go to Europe and you meet these folks there. It's like, God, this is a freaking amazing world that I didn't even know existed. It's like, I wouldn't have known had I not got hurt. So the classifications are cool. The community, even cooler.
I can only imagine the community being so cool and so perhaps close-knit, because climbing itself is still a fringe activity. And I think that sometimes draws us closer together, because we are doing something which even today is slightly counterculture. I like to joke that,
Sure.
It's a bunch of slightly maladjusted people who found each other. And now you have adaptive climbers. I'm guessing you guys maybe all even know each other, right? People you competed with, or people who are maybe the more prolific of the climbing community. You probably, you have so much to relate with and share
Sure.
with.
Yeah, and they're even more maladjusted, I think. So it's like, it's great to be a part of that, right? It's like, it's cool to be able to say, it's always comforting, I think, as a human, to talk to someone who can understand exactly what you're saying, right? Like where they're like, I get it. When you say this thing hurts, like my leg hurts me this way, they go, oh yeah, dude, I do this to help that. And it's just really nice to be around that. And yeah, I'm still friends with like the guys I competed with in my very first comp. We are still good friends. I mean, in fact, the one guy, Pete Davis, he was probably the first person I met in the adaptive world. He's an arm amputee. And Pete and I did Zodiac together. We ended up doing the first all disabled ascent of El Cap together because of that first meeting. We met at this comp in Florida, this janky comp in Florida. It was horrible. Like, as I look back on it, it was terrible, but it was amazing, right? Because I got to all of a sudden meet all these individuals who I just had no idea even existed, and forge these friendships. And Pete and I just immediately just clicked together and stayed in touch and friends. And he loves to wall climb as well. And so it was just like, oh my God, there's people who think like I do, who have these disabilities, are willing to work with it and just figure it out as we go. And then still getting after it, like still like having fun, being great, amazing people. It's just, to me, it was like, oh my God, how did I want to be in this world. Like, this is amazing to me. So it's just been a really fun thing to explore and be a part of.
Greg, you got hurt and you started using the technology at that time with your prosthetic leg to allow you to get back into climbing. I'm curious, has the technology kept progressing with prosthetics, with these adaptations to allow you to, or allow you and others in the community to keep getting better at climbing, keep using your limb better? And also, is the technology available and the state of advancement, is it running parallel to, let's say, technology for other kinds of adaptations in other sports? Where do you think we are with this sort of state of technology? Is it where you want it to be?
It's not where I want it to be. It is in a really good place. It's just it can go a lot further, I think. I was really fortunate when I started kind of climbing as an amputee climber. My prosthetist helped me make a foot that I could climb with. We made it out of titanium, and it worked. It would burn through rubber pretty quickly, so I couldn't like do a lot of different routes on it. It would have to be resoled and fixed. But then I started working with Evolve around that same time, and Evolve actually made something called the EAF, which is the Evolve Adaptive Foot, and we were able to help on the design of that. There were several people involved with that who we all kind of like traded ideas back and forth, and then did R&D with them. You know, they would make it, we would break it, that kind of a thing. And so that was really kind of like this big jump forward for leg amputees, because now all of a sudden you had this foot that you could buy online. You didn't have to have insurance to get it. It cost, so the first foot that I wore, and I actually still wear, is this foot that it costs $1,200. You're buying the inner foot piece that actually goes onto the leg, my prosthetic. So that's pretty expensive, right? And I was fortunate enough to, at the time when I was competing, the company and I worked together, TRS, who are in Boulder, and I still work together to this day. They were super helpful with me getting the foot and being able to really use it a lot. But then Evolve was like, that's pretty expensive. Like, is that a barrier? And I said, that is the biggest barrier. You need generally 2 feet. So you're talking a lot of money. And EAS came along because Evolve said, we will make this thing and make it affordable and available to anyone. And so now you can go to Evolve's website, buy the foot online, they'll ship it to your house, and you can go climbing the next day. It's pretty amazing. And you're talking a price point of $200 as opposed to $1,200. So that kind of technology jump was huge. Now I feel like we're at, like, army amputees, it's a bit harder for them. I feel like the challenges there are pretty hard to get something that will work in a lot of different realms. You know, plastic is going to climb a certain way, granite cracks, Wacos, whatever it is. So it's a lot harder to get a hand that will fit into these things across the board. The EAF allows you to basically climb a large quantity of different kinds of rock. It doesn't really matter. We could definitely fine tune that into like something that's more aggressive and downturned for like steep climbing. But right now we're not there. It would be cool to go there. I've been really fortunate to work on like some kind of like R&D projects. Arcturex and I have been a part of them for 15 years. And they're an amazing sponsor for me, where they have put money into like R&D for like how we can make a foot that moves and pushes and does all these cool things. But it's in a good spot. I feel like it could always go further and better. And that just comes down to like people taking the time to do it and spending the money to get it done.
Something you said earlier, Craig, about the timing of it all, like when you got hurt, maybe some of these things were coming together. But it seems like you also helped shape the reality. You helped take it forward, and you were able to find these collaborators. So maybe a little hat tip to some of our climbing companies who are helping. But then, you along with others kind of took what was out there, and then you took it further ahead to bring these technologies to other people in climbing who can use these things. Now, talking a little bit about shifting into what you do every day for work and how you have been able to inspire, coach, train, help others into either furthering their existing climbing, but even introduce, I believe, non-climbers to the sport of climbing.
Yes.
What I want to understand here to start off is, let's say somebody got hurt in a non-climbing way, they had maybe a shop accident and now their life has changed forever. How did that person find their way to you? And is it are you helping people learn to climb who already have expressed an interest in climbing? Maybe they have a bit of prior experience. Or are these people who are not outdoorsy, they don't climb, but somehow they have been convinced to give climbing a chance to help reshape their vision and their possibilities, maybe in a way that it has also reshaped your life?
Yeah. And it's a combination of both those things. To answer the first part, they can get to me lots of different ways. They can either just Google my name and that'll get them to my website, which is just DeMartino.com. They can go to the nonprofit that we work with, which is called Adaptive Adventures, and that's just adaptiveadventures.org. That will get them to me as well. Probably, I would say 70%, 75% of the people that we work with are non-climbers before their accidents. And so through one way or the other, they are either, so we do a lot of work
Wow.
with veterans with disabilities. So we work with the VA, the nonprofit we work with has a VA, they get an adaptive sport grant each year. And then they allow me and my wife, Cindy, to shape and build their climbing program for them. So we go all over the country and Puerto Rico and Hawaii, and we get new veterans with disabilities. So, and any disability, we're talking PTSD to fully in a wheelchair. So anything in between. So we can get anyone climbing. And so they'll come out, we'll usually start in a gym. And so we're just introducing them to, okay, this is what climbing is. This is like what it can show you in your body and how this is how you move with your new disability. But what I tell them first is I'm here to just make you a climber. Once we do that, we will figure out the adaptive piece. So let's not focus on the adaptive piece, which is what you've been focusing on, which is why you're with me. So we're here to get out of that cycle. So we want to learn how to be a climber, how to move as a climber, how to meet the community of climbing, which is amazing, right? And so show them this is climbing, this is the community, and now let's keep doing that. And so what we generally do is we'll set it up as like they'll come, it's not a one-off, we'll try to set up a program for them. So like just like say here in Denver and in the Front Range area of Colorado, we have these different community nights all up and down the Front Range. So they can come out, they can get a discounted day pass at the gym, which will include their harness and shoes. And then they come in with me and we teach them the basics of climbing with the intention of them hopefully repeating it with us and then moving them outside. So we start them indoors and then we move them to the natural world outside, because usually they're like, oh, indoor climbing is really cool. And then I'm always like, but once you go outside, you're only going to want to be there. So then we kind of take them outside, show them what that's like, and then they'll come and we'll do those programs maybe once a month where we're outdoors with them with different groups all over the place. But the idea is to get them kind of hooked with the community piece and the feeling of movement piece that will hopefully change the direction of whatever cycle they're in. Hopefully we're breaking that cycle and helping them to focus on a better quality of life instead of just like existing within this thing that they have gotten to after this traumatic event, whatever that event was. That other percentage that's left, whatever that is at the end of the day, are climbers who got hurt. Yesterday evening, I worked with an individual. He was a very strong comp climber, and then he was in a car accident. And so he is now in a wheelchair, a lot of paralysis, really got hurt pretty badly. The accident's pretty new. He's probably only 3 months out from the accident. So yesterday in the gym, climbing gym in Denver, he was using something we call an easy seat, which is a seat that takes the place of his wheelchair. And he does assisted pull-ups on this bar that we manufacture. And so this dude out of his wheelchair climbs up a 42-foot wall in Movement Englewood. And it's the first time he's out of his chair again. It's amazingly powerful stuff for individuals. And for me to see, it's like, that's crazy. And yet you see that glimmer, that spark that we get where you're like, oh, this is cool. Like, I want to keep doing this. And he's non-communicative. He does fist bumps and hand signals. And so he just came down and fist bumped me, gave me the hang loose. And his sister said, oh, he's psyched. So I was like, that's why we want to do this. That's like, you can take someone on this path and just redirect. And that's what we're doing, is we're helping them redirect and rediscover. Yes, your life's going to be different. Absolutely. I'm not going to lie about that, but it doesn't have to be bad. It can be different, and that's just different. And we just have to learn to embrace that difference and then move forward with it, instead of just like focusing so much on the negative of like, oh shoot, I can't do this, I can't do that. It's like, let's get out of that cycle and let's get into a more positive cycle. And that's the natural world embraces that. Like, the change is inevitable. So just even as we all age, right? We all are changing all the time, right? We're addressing and figuring out and evolving with it. But if you fight it, it's so much harder. It's like, you're not going to change it. Like, we can't change getting older. It's just, that's the way it is. And so you have to embrace that. And trauma is very similar to that. It's like the aging process and trauma have a lot in common in that things are breaking down. And so you're like in this state of like maintenance of, oh God, I just want to be able to keep doing what I'm doing. So what do I need to do that? And that's what people like me are for, is to say, oh, here's a fun way to do that. You can be climbing and enjoying yourself in this amazing world. So it's all about redirection, right? See something different. I think the thing, and I'm always awed by this, is being in this world is such a perspective builder. It's really easy, I think, for anyone to just kind of get stuck with what's happening to you, and you're just kind of spinning your wheels. You know, you're not going backwards, you're not going forwards, you're just kind of spinning. And I was doing that. When I came back to climbing, it was amazing and fun and exciting. But then I was like, what am I doing? Like, am I actually doing any good with this? And like, I went through this thing, what am I doing? And I was really fortunate I came back from Yosemite after my first trip there with Hans, and a good friend of mine, Timmy O'Neill, contacted me and said, hey man, I'm taking some veterans with disabilities climbing, and they're missing their legs. And he's like, I want you to come and help us down in Eldo. And I was like, dude, I don't want to do that. I was like, that's not my thing, man. And he's like, yeah, it is. I'll see you Saturday. And he just kind of hung up on me, and I'm like, damn it. So that Saturday, I'm down in Boulder. I meet him, and it turned out to be the best day ever. It was they were all younger than me. They were freaking hysterical. They were so flippant about just everything. And one guy was missing his leg like me. One guy was above the knee. And I think the other guy was missing, he was missing his leg like me as well. So two like me and one bigger amputation. But just like funny as hell, like they were just having the best time. They were like, this is bananas how weird this is, but like, this is kind of cool. I mean, I left that day with this new perspective of like, oh my God, like there are more people like me. They just need to understand that we can be working together and helping each other moving forward. And so it's given me this perspective shift of, it's not just like the negative that happened to me. I also see all this positive all the time. It's reinforced every time I work with someone. That individual last night, I've been doing this a long time, and he rolled in, and you immediately know this person, he's, any new climber, right? They're nervous. They don't know what to expect. He was a climber before, so he's trying to navigate this. I used to do this really well, and now I'm in a wheelchair. I'm like, what the hell is happening? Is this even something I want to do? And then you have me taking him out on the floor. We're climbing 10 minutes later. He's up in the air 40 feet. It's like, damn, that's powerful. And I think I get that perspective reinforced every time I do programs. And so I'm just like, now it's funny. Now I kind of crave it. It's like a drug where you're just like, damn, you see the power in it. And you just want to be able to funnel that to as many people who need it. And so I feel like I get that just on a repeated basis. And it fuels my desire to keep climbing. It fuels my desire to build the community and folks kind of navigate what they're navigating.
Thanks for that thoughtful response. I can see how life affirming and how almost addictive that feeling of delight is when you see somebody who's been touched like that. Besides the work that you directly do with the adaptive community, you are out there working with them in person. I think you also have a side gig as a accomplished public speaker. You go and inspire others, you give talks, etc., to all kinds of audiences. And I think that, hey, listen, if I was in one of your talks, there would be some very clear messages and stories I would get out. I would leave the talk inspired and whatnot. But I'm just wondering if there has been feedback or audience responses in some of these talks, which has actually surprised you, and you were like, wait, I gave the story and, I expect people to react in a certain way, but this person got impacted and came up with this reaction that I did not expect.
That is a very astute observation on your part. That happens, I won't say every time I speak, but I would say 90% of the time. I'll always stick around. I always open myself up and say, if you want to come up and speak about something or you have a question, I'm an open book. They'll come up with just like, you said this, and then they'll repeat something back to me that I said, and I'm thinking, I don't think I said that. Like, did I say that? I don't remember saying that, but like, okay, it's what they hear and internalize, and then that gets brought into the fabric of whatever they're dealing with, and then you have to like kind of listen to kind of untangle that, just kind of where they're coming from. It'll just be like a trauma that happened to them for whatever reason, and they're dealing with it, or they just want to know that they're not the first person to deal with what they're dealing with. And so they'll speak to me and say, I broke my back, or I broke my neck as well. And they just want to know that they're not the only person dealing with it. And I always tell people, like, anything you're dealing with, you're not the first, right? Like someone else has dealt with it. Someone else has probably figured out how to deal with it well. And you should find that person, search that out. And so usually if they're at one of my talks, that's what they're doing. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And I end up getting, if I speak in a climbing gym, I get like many new participants that way, because they'll come in as a disabled person thinking, I can't rock climb. That's insane. And so they'll come to the talk and then they're like, I think maybe I can rock climb and I should go talk to that guy over there. And so I get I get new participants that way, which is awesome. But I do also get, every now and again, I'll get something where it's just it's a trauma like I've never heard. Like it'll be something, just a very different kind of trauma where I'm like, damn. And so then that person will want to unpack parts of that with me, and I'll do that. And then when I speak, I just spoke at a kid's school, which those are usually hysterical, because if I open it up to questions, they ask the most just weird, funny questions. Like, I mean, just like, did it hurt when you cut your leg off? Or did it hurt when you fell off the cliff? And like, I get that question a lot. And then they're like, does your leg get itchy? Can I punch your leg? Can I kick your leg? It's like, they have no filter, which is fantastic. And they just want to ask and know. And so I love those interactions as well. They don't care so much about the trauma or the climb. They're just like, whatever, dude, you're a climber. I don't care. I did have a kid literally ask me if he could kick me in the leg. And I was like, you can, but it's a metal leg. It's going to hurt you, not me. And he kicked it and it hurt. And that was a little life lesson, right? So I do feel like it is always interesting what people hear you say. Even with this podcast, someone will listen to this and they're going to process it a particular way and go, he said this. And it's like, maybe, but like, that's how they're processing that through into the fabric of their life. And that's okay. That's how we all do it. So it's just really interesting to see it happen and be a part of it and try to untangle it then. So yeah, it happens. That's a good question.
Actually, this part of your question also, I think, hit me in a surprising way. I didn't expect this to be part of the answer about how Nona does kids react to an
Yeah.
adaptive athlete, you in this case, and how evocative that little story is about that kid wanting to grapple with your leg and wanting to feel it with
Right.
all its
Right.
senses.
Exactly.
Kids have a beautiful way of just
Yes.
cutting through things, not letting bogged down by all the baggage that comes
Right.
with being an
Exactly.
adult.
That's societal buffer that we all have. They don't have that yet. They're just like, I want to know about this. And then they just ask. And so it's a wonderful thing for sure.
Great, you got hurt, and you had a family already
Yeah.
by the time you got hurt. And when something like this happens, it impacts not just you, but impacts our family. It sounds like your family has been right there with you, and they have also used this event as a positive force. You mentioned your wife, Cindy, partners with you, or maybe on her own as well, also does work with climbers and with the adaptive community. I'm wondering any non obvious things that have transformed her as well, besides obviously just the life giving nature of the work she's doing. If I was to ask her, Cindy, when you started doing this thing, many moons ago, would you know that this would have changed your life in this beautiful, unexpected way?
Yeah. I think she would say probably similar to what I say is like, I wouldn't want to do it again. Right. Like I wouldn't ever say, yeah, let's go ahead and rewind and do that again. But I think she would say I wouldn't change it now. There's always pieces and parts that you would love to not have. Me personally, I don't want the chronic pain. I don't want the paralysis. I don't want the trouble that I get from the fusions and amputations. But and for her watching all that, she is we've been together a long time and she has seen it all. So she would tell you, I'm sure, she doesn't like to see me suffer, and there is a certain level of suffering that just comes part and parcel with trauma, right? It's just the way that is. So she would probably say that would be nice to not have that, but we wouldn't either one, I think, change where it's taken us, because would I have gotten to this place in my life? I don't think I would have. I think I would have had a fine life. It would have been great. We would have raised our kids together and done our thing. But I don't think we would have the depth and the richness that we have now, which is really pretty powerful, I think, for our marriage, for our relationship with our kids, for our relationships with the world. That's the perk that you can never kind of measure, and you also can ever really plan and predict it. It's either going to happen or it's not. And I think for us, we've been really fortunate that it has happened. I think she would tell you that, like, wouldn't do it again, but also wouldn't change it now. It's become a very good thing for us. Even with all the negative that goes with it, it's still a very positive force for us and for our family. And so I think that that's a powerful thing to have and to be able to be a part of. So I think we both see and appreciate that on different levels on different days. But that's something that I think she would agree with pretty wholeheartedly.
What about your kids as well? Just one, if you can summarize like how I think your kids grew up with having a dad who's gone through this
Right.
event, and who looks and in some ways also deals with the routine of everyday life different than
Sure.
other adults. Do you think this has also been a positive change or a life-giving kind of force?
I think what it's done with them, and I see this in them a lot because they've grown into just wonderful adults. Our daughter was 4 when I got hurt and kind of remembers me before. She's like, I have memories, like glimmers of you before you got hurt. Our son was 2, so he doesn't really remember me beforehand. What I've seen them do is as they've grown up, they've been exposed, number one, to the climbing community, which is, as you said before, like kind of the outlier community anyway. So they understand that like not everybody is like a normal 9 to 5 person, right? We have friends who live in cars, and we have friends who just travel. And so they've seen that. And then when I got hurt and the years after, I think their level of empathy for others I see in them is amazing. I'm sure a lot of that is just that's their nature, but also I think that comes from seeing what I went through and what Cindy and I have gone through together, where they go, there's a lot that had to be dealt with, and he still deals with, but also I see them then reflect that to others. They actually will assist us in programs every now and again. Our son Will actually went with us to Hawaii. We did like an outdoor day with the veterans there, so we needed a lot of hands, and they've both been climbers their whole life. So and Will actually works in a climbing gym, and so he is like watching him work with these individuals who, you know, many years older than him, disabled in one form or the other, and he just jumps right in. He's like comfortable engaging, and our daughter is the same way. She's comfortable speaking and teaching and showing, and I think that comes from them being around this their whole life and just seeing this is how my mom and dad do it. I'm sure they get like, I always joke with my wife, like, I'm sure our son is tired of people telling him that they know us at the gym. You know, like, you don't want to know your parents that well. You just, you know, your parents are out there, but like you want separation when you're in your 20s. Someone will text me and be like, "Oh, I saw your son. I told him I know you." And I'm like, he probably loved that. it's like everybody wants a little bit of separation, but I think now as they become like these really cool young adults, I see the empathy they have for others. And I think that comes from growing up in a world of like, you see people who are just wrecked and still have an amazing quality of life and are happy and fulfilled and leading really valuable lives, with spouses, you know, all the things that we all want, but like you get to see this whole nother facet of the adaptive world rolled into all of that. And I think that affects how they deal with people and life in general.
Your kids seem very intelligent and also perceptive and all-rounded. I'm wondering, did you just get lucky that your kids reacted and took on this life change in this best way possible in helping them develop these skills? Or were there also some things you and your wife did more proactively to help them understand what went on and how this can be something that allows them now to just, you know, be more evolved human beings?
We were always very honest with them growing up if they had questions about what I have to deal with, how I have to deal with it. They have seen me through surgeries. They've seen, you know, everything. They've seen me when I'm really, you know, bad, like low after surgeries, things like that, where the recovery arc is very slow. A lot of it is luck, you know, that they came into this world, they're leaning that way already. And then we just kind of help navigate that with them and guide them through that. They obviously were kids. Same trials and tribulations every kid has grown up. But I do feel like they were able to see this piece that maybe a lot of people don't get to see. And that is, you know, the adaptive side of like after trauma, what does that look like long term? Because they see it every day or whenever they're here. And I think that affects how you look at things, because it still affects how I look at things, because like I said, it's a really good perspective builder. And I think that they have a very unique perspective because they got to see not only me, but they also saw how Cindy navigated it. And then they also see how the participants we work with navigate their own thing. And so they're able to see all these different things in real life, in real time. And then how does that affect them going forward? And I think that some of that's luck, but then also some of that is, I think it's probably just innate in them already, that maybe just brought it to the surface a little quicker, maybe because they ask questions, right? They always ask. They're smart, like you said. They're very intelligent people, so they'll have questions like, "Why do you have to do this? And how does this work? And why does that happen?" And like they're the only people that I'm gonna like a completely open book to, like where I'll tell them anything they ask. Obviously, when meeting in the public space, you have that line of like, I'll share up to here, but then the rest of that's going to be private. And with your kids, you're just an open book, or I am, I should say. And same with Cindy, we're very open and honest with them. Like, this is what's happening. This is a challenge, and this is what we're doing with it. So I think they've been able to see that as well. So I think that all kind of factors into how they have turned out in the world, and maybe where they're going to end up in the world too. I don't know where that's going to be, but it's just fun to watch that all change and evolve as they grow.
Yes, they took that one character building event, came out so much better for it. Coming towards the end of our conversation here, Craig, I wanted to ask you, is there a particular mantra or philosophy that you live by that keeps you focused and driven?
So I sign my emails. I have no idea who said this first. I wish I knew. But it says life is 10% circumstance and 90% my reaction to those circumstances. And I think I've always been geared that way, where I've been a glass is half full kind of a person my whole life, probably. But I think after getting injured, and then as I've gotten older, I think it makes me really appreciate that and say, yeah, you know what, this particular thing sucks, whatever that is. How am I going to react to it? Am I going to just lose my mind and just, go down the rabbit hole? Or am I going to just, okay, I'm going to move away from this? And I've always told people, like, if you're moving and you're moving away from the trauma, that's a positive thing. If you're just spinning and staying in that same spot, then that becomes what defines you. And I don't think any of us want that negative thing or one thing to define who we are as a human, because in reality, it's just like a blip in the path. I mean, if you lay out your life in a linear line, that incident is one big bump, right? But it's like, it's not my whole life. So how I react to that is very important. And I kind of then put that into everything, like how I interface with people, the public, my family, my wife. That reaction is very valuable, and I get to control that. That's one of those things that we do have control over, and I think that if you are geared a certain way, you're going to do better. And so if you're constantly focused on the negative, obviously that's where you're going to be. Me, it's like I want to take that circumstance and let my reaction be a positive spin on that, whatever that's going to be. It works 99% of the time. It does not always work, and I think that everyone knows that, right? In life, you don't always bounce into the positive. Sometimes it's negative, and even then, you have to react a particular way. And so that reaction is going to dictate where you go from there. It's like you're going to have to deal with the negative. How are you going to react to it? And so for me, I can control that. It's kind of comforting to me to know that, okay, I can react to this a particular way that's going to either help it or hurt it. What's that going to look like? So I think that comes with age. That's one of the positives of getting older, is like you have the ability and perspective to like step back a little bit and be like, okay, what is actually happening here? And like, how is this going to work? As opposed to just like, firing off, and just usually it isn't the right thing to do. So it's nice to be able to have that maturity to sit back and say, okay, how am I going to react to this now? And then move forward with that. So that's been a good one for me.
90% reaction. Yeah. Life is all about how we deal with what we are confronted with every moment.
Exactly.
You have obviously reacted in a way that is inspiring, Craig. But when you are out there, again, meeting many people out there who may not have had such a catalyst in their lives, any message to them and how they can react better to the day-to-day and use that to their advantage?
I think a catalyst can come in any form. It can be big, it can be small. People always think like, well, you had the, like, and I've had this conversation with people when I've done speaking things, is they're like, you had this big event and then you recovered really well, and now you moved forward. And I'm like, yes and no. Yes, I had a big event. I recovered to an extent, and I had to deal with a lot of things for the rest of my life. But it is that catalyst yes, that was a big event. It doesn't have to be falling off a cliff, because everyone's going to fall off their own cliff, whatever that is. It could be emotional, it could be it could be heavy trauma, but it still boils down to, okay, what are you going to do with that catalyst, and are you going to use it to move you forward, or are you going to use it to move you into the negative? And I think they come in all shapes and forms. I think you have to be willing to be flexible and change, because it doesn't come the way you think it's going to come. I'm a testament to that. I didn't, if you asked me 30 years ago what I wanted to do, did I want to be a pro climber and teach people how to climb and do that? I would have said yes. But then if you said, well, you're going to get dropped off of a cliff first, then I'd been like, no, never mind. So it's like the catalysts come in all different shapes and forms, and it's usually not the way you want it to come. It sneaks up on you. And so I think you have to be open to that and looking for it. And that is what ends up moving you then forward.
Great. That is profound. What I was not expecting, I'm absorbing that. And I think others will as well, where one has to be available to be catalyzed, to be informed,
right?
To be shaken up out of whatever they want to be shaken out of. And it's like when you go to a massage, you have to relax your muscles. If you don't relax your muscles, then the chiropractor or the massage therapist cannot do their job. So you have to be able to be willing to be soft and malleable. Great. Couple of final fun questions. What has been the best $100 that you spent recently? Could be a different amount.
Buying a plane ticket to Spain with my wife. Yeah, go climbing. It was more than $100 though. So
I was gonna say, you will have to let me on your plane buying, hot tips.
Yeah, definitely more than 100. But it was that was like the best money spent. So yeah, lately that's the best.
Amazing. Yeah, glad you had a delightful time in Spain, as most of us would, on a climbing trip, escaping the cold in Colorado.
Exactly.
What is a meal that you could eat every day?
Pasta. I could.
Pasta.
I'm Italian. I grew up in a big Italian family. I could do that. I seriously could do that every day. And I don't think I would ever get tired.
You make your own pasta sometimes?
We do. Actually, every Christmas, my wife my mom made homemade raviolis every Christmas. And so my wife kind of took that on as when the kids were little. And so I just kind of help a little bit. She'll make the dough, she'll make the meat, and I could eat, again, like there's so many different kinds of pasta. That's why I find it easy to say I could eat that pretty much every day. I love it.
Homemade pasta, nothing better.
Oh,
great. If there was one message you could leave on a giant billboard on a highway, what would that message be? Just
that this is all fluid. It's all changing. Don't get stuck on right now, like whatever it is, good or bad. It's a fluid situation. And that's what I tell people. I tell myself that all the time, like good or bad. Like if you've just climbed El Cap, that's awesome. It's fluid and going to change. If you are laying in bed in chronic pain, that's going to change as well. It's always fluid and moving. And as long as you can embrace that, you're going to do fine. Just realize that it is not the rest of your life. It's just today. So deal with it, move forward, because it's going to change tomorrow. Sure. Yeah. That is again, going down, to the wisdom of the ancients, embrace the present and, yeah, exactly. Beautiful, Craig. It's been a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today on Ageless Athlete. Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure completely. Wow, what a journey. I am still buzzing from this chat with Craig. After his life-altering accident, Craig's determination to return to climbing, not just as a participant, but as a competitor, is unreal. It speaks volumes about his strength and resilience,
and his victories in adaptive climbing competitions are a powerful testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome any obstacle. But what truly sets Craig apart is his passion for giving back. He has used his experience to inspire and empower others, sharing the joy of climbing with veterans and individuals with disabilities, proving that with adaptation and community, anything is possible. There are so many things about this conversation that I cherish. Being open to change, having a growth mindset, always being present, but also always looking forward. I loved his ending life mantra: 10% circumstance, 90% reaction to that. Yes, it is all about what we do with what life throws at us. I'm not a parent. Well, I have Raja, my little pooch. Anyhow, some powerful lessons also for raising a family. You can follow Craig's adventures on his Insta at CraigDem, CraigDem, and if you want to work with him, at the nonprofit adaptiveadventures.org. Thank you again for joining us on Ageless Athlete. Craig's story is a reminder that the path to achieving our dreams is rarely straightforward. It's about embracing the detours, adapting to change, and finding strength in our passions. May Craig's journey motivate you to push your boundaries, find joy in movement, and never stop chasing those dreams. Until next time, get outside, enjoy the spring weather, stay adventurous, stay healthy, and stay ageless.